Hi, PerspectaWeather.com meteorologist Paul Dorian here on Monday, December 30th. Quite a miserable way to start the new work week here in the Mid-Atlantic region. Occasional rain today, some drizzle at times. Could even be a rumble of thunder or two. Quite a dynamic system we're dealing with low pressure forming along a boundary zone. There are a couple different fronts we're actually dealing with in the Mid-Atlantic region. A warm frontal system, and then later today, early tonight, there'll be kind of an occluded front that comes through from the west to the east. And again, there can't even be a rumble of thunder, maybe a little bit of heavier rain for a brief time during the day today. Colder air moves in on Tuesday, paves the way for a pretty cold and windy New Year's Eve tomorrow night, Tuesday night, and a pretty cold and windy day on Wednesday, New Year's Day. High temperatures Wednesday afternoon, generally near 40 or 42 degrees or so in the DC, Philadelphia, New York City corridor. Stays dry on Thursday, and then another wet system pushes into the northeast U.S. for the end of the work week, Friday, maybe even going into Saturday as well. Looking longer term, a couple of cold air outbreaks are on the way for the central and eastern U.S. for this weekend and for next week. It's still a little too early to tell how sustained that cold air will be, whether we'll have more sustained cold air going forward through the month of January as compared with the last couple of weeks. Kind of a battle going on in the atmosphere, and that's kind of producing some wildly varying solutions in the computer forecast models as well. Before we get to the current weather situation, let's take a look at the month of January with respect to NOAA's climate forecast system model called the CFS. This is a forecast map of 500 millibar height anomalies for the month of January, put out just a few days ago, December 26th. And one thing I want to point out here, notice the main troughiness here from this model is along the western side of Canada, and really it's hard to tell, hard to see the lighter blue here, but trough across the western part of the U.S. And with a pattern like that, colder than normal air will really not make its way all the way into the eastern U.S., or maybe not even into the central U.S. It'll be more or less confined to the western part of the U.S. and Canada. But in just a 3-day period, quite a significant shift in the CFS forecast anomaly chart for the month of January. In fact, let's take a look here at the very latest forecast map. And here we go. Notice now quite an area here shifted into the central part of the nation. What we're looking at is this bluer area now, more or less in the central part of the U.S., and we'll see if that shift continues. Just 3 days ago it was more or less across the western U.S., now over the central U.S., and maybe over the next couple of days it'll continue to trend more to the east, and that would allow for the possibility of more sustained cold air into the central and eastern U.S. for the month of January. A few other charts I'd like to go over before we get to the current weather situation, just to show again kind of the battle going on in the atmosphere. We often take a look at teleconnection indices this time of the year. One is known as the North Atlantic Oscillation, the NAO. Another is its closely related cousin called the AO, the Arctic Oscillation. And look at this forecast shown in red on this particular map for the next couple of weeks, how it varies quite wildly from well positive all the way down to well negative. And really this neutral zone here, this is what we're looking for. Is the NAO going into negative territory or positive territory? That's related to the temperature and height anomaly pattern up across the North Atlantic, and really has an impact on cold air outbreaks into the eastern U.S., whether or not we get any and whether or not they are sustained. But when you see a variability like this from way up in positive territory to way down in negative territory, that's telling you there's a battle going on in the atmosphere. It's just a little too early to tell which way this is going, but it's something we'll keep an eye on over the next few days. Well, one last set of charts we can look at before we get to the current weather situation of the 850 millibar temperature anomaly forecast maps for 5-day periods. This is the current 5-day period. And again, we'll see how we kind of go back and forth between above normal or below normal, back to above normal. And this is again from the ensemble run of the GFS at 6E. This is the current 5-day period. Despite a cold shot coming in tomorrow and tomorrow night into the day on Wednesday, the overall average for this current 5-day period above normal along the eastern seaboard here. But now we go out to days 6 to 10. This is running from January 4th all the way to about January 9th, second week of January, basically next week. Again, colder than normal here. It looks like we do have a couple of cold air outbreaks coming this weekend and into next week, but then we go out even farther in time here, back to above normal, showing up here for days 11 to 15, running from January 9th to January 14th. So still kind of a back and forth pattern. Something will probably shake out over the next several days in terms of whether or not this colder air will be more a sustained pattern for the central and eastern U.S. going through the month of January. But still lots of uncertainty and a battle going on in the atmosphere, and that's leading to some pretty high variability in the computer forecast models for the next few weeks. Well, one thing that's not variable is that this new work week, the last week of December going into the first few days of January, will start off on a wet note throughout the mid-Atlantic region. We have some rain and drizzle, generally mild conditions for this time of the year as we start the day on Monday. I wanted to point out a couple things here in the western U.S. Notice a couple of lines out here kind of trying to form here. These are kind of rotating around from the west to the east, and there's an occluded front out in the western part of Pennsylvania that will be working its way from the west to the east, and that could result in a brief heavier downpour midday, afternoon hours, maybe even a rumble of thunder or two in the I-95 corridor region. Radar is not really picking up some of the drizzle that is currently occurring, and again there are some pockets of dense fog, especially south of the Mason-Dixon line. We could have fog pretty much at any time today and tonight, but with these lines developing out here in the western part of Pennsylvania, watch for a rumble of thunder, maybe a brief heavier downpour anywhere in the I-95 corridor region during the midday or afternoon hours. Well, let's finally take a look at the surface forecast maps from the 6E GFS. Again, quite a dynamic system we're dealing with today, not only in the mid-Atlantic region, but the northeast U.S. where it's cold enough for some ice and snow, and over the Great Lakes. Quite a strong storm system, 983 millibar low here on Monday morning. Let's now push forward and again watch for a rumble of thunder, or listen for a rumble of thunder during the midday or afternoon hours as that occluded front comes through. Some significant snow across the western portion of the Great Lakes region. Even a good low pressure areas showing up off the mid-Atlantic coastline by early this evening. And again, you have to go way up in northern New England for some accumulating snow, but the western Great Lakes, definitely some accumulating snow out of this system. And then the colder air really works its way into the area later tomorrow, going into tomorrow night. Winds will pick up. It will be quite cold for New Year's Eve, without question. Winds could gust up to 25 or 30 miles per hour or so tomorrow night along the I-95 corridor region. So if you're going out for fireworks, for example, tomorrow night, bundle up. It will be quite cold, and it looks like it stays pretty cold and windy on Wednesday as well. New Year's Day, high temperatures close to the 40-degree mark in places like D.C., Philadelphia, New York City. And again, still be a stiff breeze, maybe 25 mile per hour wind gusts during the day on Wednesday. And then Thursday continues dry with high pressure and control, but yet another wet system looks like it'll advance into the mid-Atlantic region, into the northeast U.S. by the end of the work week. Looks like some periods of rain on Friday. Could be some showers heading into the weekend, and then cold air outbreak arrives this weekend. Another cold air shot next week, and we'll see how that develops in terms of sustainability going through the month of January. So that's it for now. For PerspectaWeather.com, I'm meteorologist Paul Dorian.